Okay, good morning. All right, so this is basically the same setup you've seen. Switched one pedal out here, but what I did, the main thing I've changed here is I just pulled out my larger pedal board. This is one of the pedal trains with the 6 rails, so you can comfortably do 3 rows. Same width as my other one. And forgive me, I'm going to mute this mic and see what model this is. I can't see it. I'm all guitar corded and headphoned in and everything, but I'll see if I can post in the description what it is. But a little less relevant, but in any case, it enabled me to put pedals a little more where I want them and space them out and use the kind of cabling I want. So let's today I'm playing my Epiphone, what is this thing? Les Paul Custom Koa top. This is a Les Paul week for me because I have a new guitar coming this week. It should be here in a couple days. But in any case, let's go through this pedal board. So up until switching to this board, I've had a real so the Warm Audio Pedal 76 is my favorite 1176 style that I've used and owned. And I've owned a few. I mean, I haven't owned all of them, but in any case, this thing sounds great. However, and we might find out that it's still doing this today as I've battled this. It's got to be the transformers in there picking up my computer communicating with my phone or something. It has something to do with it's picking up some sort of frequency, which when I'm recording typically isn't an issue. Sometimes it is, but whatever I'm doing with this setup right now, it wasn't an issue. Last night I tried a recording after I set this up just to make sure the levels are good. And it did come back, but as you can hear right now, there's no noise. So we're going to see what happens when we turn it on. So I'm doing this in tandem with the PC2A, which I'm also having some minor issues with. So I'm hitting it 12 to 1 here. Relatively slow attack, fast release, what they call maybe the Dr. Pepper settings. If you're not familiar with Dr. Pepper settings in an 1176 compressor, take a look. Just kind of a generic way to set it up that you're going to be in the ballpark. So this is you're going to hear some of my post-processing in OBS. I have an automatic leveler, I have a tape emulator, and I have a limiter in there and some EQ. That's it. I'm not doing any reverb in there anymore. You're also hearing the bus compression off the SSL6, which is part of this setup. You can get away with doing this kind of setup without it. You'll just be running more stuff in serial. And I'll explain that when we get a little further down the signal chain. So we're going into the 1176, or the pedal 76. So this is both pickups. I don't know if that meter's accurate. I might be peaking at 3 dB of reduction. That's as much as I got. I'm just calming the peaks, getting a little bit of that transformer sound. I'm gonna mute the mic here for a second. Okay, then from that I'm going into the, knock on wood, that's working so far, the PC2A from Effectrode, which is an LA2A style tube optical compressor. There's a tube in this thing. It runs at 12 volts. Good, this one's working today too. The gain knob, something's going weird with it. But today it's working, so I'm not complaining. Again, as you can see, I'm not hitting it very hard. I'm just using them to kind of shape the tone that's coming through it, because I've got a lot of different guitars I play, which all have different outputs. So this one just gives them, doesn't mask their outputs, it just kind of tailors them a little bit, so I can just jump in and play. I'm going to turn the mic off. does a real nice job of rounding it out, giving it some fullness. Just that combo, the 1176 into LA2A, is something I've grown to like quite a bit. Okay, so next we're going on to the John K. Equilux. Now, Spaceman Audio did a pedal called the Equinox, which was their take on a Pultec style EQ, just tailored towards guitar. The Equilux is a clone of that. Now, John K., at least from the little bit of reading I did, he's a very nice guy to work with. I actually had to ask him to help me with something on this, and he was really great about it. He fixed it. See? That's some of the noise I'm talking about. That's coming out of this one. And I think it has to do with something trying to communicate in the background. But in any case, so this is a Pultec style EQ tailored for guitar specifically. Alright, I'm going to mute the mic. Again, everything so far is really just there to warm it up, really to embrace kind of that analog kind of sound. And I should also mention, and we'll get there in a moment, but I've been using my AC15 for a while, so I figured I haven't used my Bass Breaker 45 in a bit. So you're hearing the Bass Breaker 45 today. Okay, next we have the Warm Audio Ringer Bringer. Now the Ringer Bringer is obviously a ring mod pedal, but the drive part of the circuit is always active in it. So, and it sounds really, really good. I think it's the most interesting thing about the pedal is this little drive circuit. It really does a really nice thing in front of an amp. But let me mute the mic, make a couple sounds. So as you may be able to hear there, I've got just that ring modulation just ever so slightly in there to just give it a little bit of that sour, you know. You don't want too much of the sour. Well, sometimes you might, but in this case, I was just kind of inspired by that. Just that slight sourness, that Bill Frisell kind of thing. It just does it perfect, and it's all analog. Okay, so from the Ringer Bringer goes down to the floor here. I've got my Morley Little Alligator. Just a volume pedal. Nothing fancy going on there. And then out of the volume pedal into the Trio Plus. Now the reason why I'm doing that is because it's because of the way I'm going into the SSL6. I want the Trio Plus to be before the amp. Because in the Trio 6, the SSL6, channel 1, I have my Power Load IR from Fryette, which is a load box. I have the analog cab sim coming out via XLR into channel 1. And that's going to be my core tone, my amp tone, all analog, no digital, and then I'm going to take a Q send from the SSL6, and that's going to feed into my wet effects, and we'll get into that in a moment. So that's why I'm going from the volume pedal into the trio rather than the volume pedal directly into the amp. Because when I'm running a loop on here, it's also going to pump through channel 1 on my console here, which gives me a pure, clean, dry tone to mess with, and then the wet tones I can mix in as needed, or vice versa. So from the trio here, if you haven't used a trio, one of the really nice things about the Trio Plus is one side, there's two outputs. One side can go straight to your amp. There's also a mixer output. And when you use both of those outputs, which I am, the mixer output just outputs the drums and the bass, which is very cool, because I'm sending the mixer out, which is just drums and bass, to channel 3 and 4 on the SSL6. So let me just I'm going to mute this mic. I'm going to put a little music in here. Okay, so from the mixer out, which is just drums and bass, I'm going into the Nano Cortex. The Nano Cortex I have set up like a Neve 1073. In fact, the capture I'm using is a, and forgive me, I'd have to look at the order. It's a 1176 through a Pultec EQ into a 1073. I've added in a little bit of a couple reflections of slapback type delay. I've added in some additional active compression rather than just a captured compression, and I've also added in a little bit of reverb to give it some space. That way I can I don't have to use reverb on the back end in the box, so to speak. I just wanted the mastering type effects to be in the box. So that's just the mixer out, okay? And then the guitar, or the amp out of the Trio Plus, is going to my amp, which is, as I mentioned before, the Bass Breaker 45. I'm going out 16 ohms into the Fryette Power Load IR. The Fryette Power Load IR analog cab sim into channel 1 on here. And then I'm taking Q-Send number 1 and sending it all the way over to the mood, and that's where the wet effects start. The mood's pretty straightforward. Let me just quiet down these drums and bass for a minute. Okay, so for the mood on the left side, I am using the slip mode turned all the way up. Just doing a little Chase Blissy, makes me want to put on a flannel and grow a beard kind of sound, but it's very cool. And then on the right side, I'm using the tape mode. And what I do is I'll usually capture something prior to me recording my trio. That's, I guess my workflow is a different conversation, but I usually dial it in the moment. Obviously, I don't usually have it that loud. I'll mix it in again in the moment. You know, my workflow is more of a just improvised, go ready, set workflow. There isn't a lot of setup. I guess all this work I do makes it so I don't have to think about it when I want to get in and play. I guess there's no obstacles to me just, you know, doing something creatively. So the engineering's done already, I guess, is the way I'm setting this up. Okay, so we've got our drums, we've got our bass, that we're coming out of the Q send into the mood. The next step is the Zoya. Let's mute this again. So the Zoya, the patch I'm currently working on is called Cloud Temple, and I have kind of a loose walkthrough of it, and I'm still in the process of developing this for myself. The one thing I'm going to change is right now I have some automatically recording loopers and some sound-on-sound loops going into a 2-channel stereo mixer. I'm probably going to change the stereo mixer to 1 channel and then have a 2-channel mono mixer for the loopers, but that's not done yet. So what it is right now, you got 3 basic functions on the front: record, play and stop, and mix, or fade. We'll call it fade. So as it is right now, if I put something in there, I forgot what I did my drum rhythm in. All right, good. I did it in E. Okay, so in a short, I usually don't pluck rhythms like this, but it's just easy for this video. So what happens is this will slowly develop. The automatically recording loopers will grab pieces of this sound-on-sound loop as it evolves. Like I said, I can turn this value down and it can fade, so you can leave everything live and play into it, and it'll slowly evolve as you play into it. But right now we're just going to leave it as a fixed evolving loop. The other thing I have attached to this is I have tap tempo controlling LFOs, as well as that control sequencing, the modulation rate. I have modulation on the tap tempo is controlling a bunch of stuff internally in this patch, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of this particular patch. So there's a lot of things tied to the tap tempo, and for instance, there's LFOs attached to the sequencers that are controlling the speed of the loopers, which is where you're starting to hear the different notes come through. It's cycling through octaves and fifths. So I can tap a tempo, and it'll stay in rhythm with the drums and bass. And that gives me kind of a non-repetitive evolving loop that's, kind of loose. And I'm finding that because, when you're working with a drum machine, which is not very loose, it's quantized, it plays against this very well, because this is a little bit on the looser side. So it kind of adds to that feel, I guess, for the spacey kind of ambient stuff I like to do. So in addition to controlling a bunch of tap tempo internally in the Zoya, I'm also sending a MIDI clock out to the Volante. So the Volantes, by the way, we're still listening to, well, I guess the Zoya is the first stereo, so now we're officially playing in stereo. But the tap tempo is being controlled by the Zoya as well in the Volante. So let's move on to the Volante. And again, because the tempo is being controlled by the Zoya, it's already in time. And what I've got is, I've got all 4 heads activated. I'm in the tape mode. I've got it at half speed, which allows me to have much longer delay times. I've got head 1 on the left, head 2 center, head 3 right, head 4 center. So the reflections kind of bounce around in there. And here's how that sounds along with the drums. In fact, let me mute this mic for a second. I'm going to add some guitar. So remember, the Trio Plus also has a looper in it. So what I'll do is I'll add a little guitar, typically in there to fill things in. And again, this is why I have the Trio in front of the amp. So the nice thing about this is, and I'm just going to mute the wet side real quick just so you can hear how much of the analog kind of chord tone I have mixed in. This is something I did for a long time when I used to have my own studio. I had much more of a proper studio than this, and I worked in a recording studio, but I always liked having a direct signal. That's all it is. What it does when you add the wet effects in is it just fills it in nicely. So let me see if I can make an example of that. All right, so this is both. I'm going to take out the analog side. I'm just going to be quiet for a second. This is without. All right, I'm going to add it in here in 1 second. It's subtle, but it just adds more depth into there. And, you know, I've thought about making a video on this. There's a general consensus that latency is a bad thing. In an instance like this, you can actually leverage latency. Part of what's adding that depth to it is the fact that there's a little latency between that pure signal coming in and the signal being sent out to Q-send, going through a number of pedals, and then coming back into a stereo channel on the console. So you can use latency to your advantage, at least if that's the kind of effect you want. But for me, it adds in a little bit of fullness and depth that works very well in a spacey setting like this. So let's bring the drums and the rhythm guitar. Well, you're actually hearing the rhythm guitar. So that's another thing, is because the bass and the drums is being sent out separately out of the Trio Plus. This is why the Trio Plus is really great. I really hope they're working on a new version of this, because there's a lot of opportunity with it. But as it is, it works great. But let's bring in the drums and the bass. Sometimes I'll experiment with maybe longer delay times. Faster delay times. Quarter notes. Okay, and then the last one in the signal chain here is the night sky. The night sky I have, there's actually, the night sky is another one of those, in my opinion, is extremely under the radar. And it shouldn't be. I don't know why it is, but the way in which it creates reverb and the way in which you can send the signal around. You know, I don't just have to send the modulation to the reverb. I can send it to the pitch modification. I can send it to the filter. And as a result, you can come up with some really wild things. Right now, I'm actually just using it pretty vanilla. Let's just see if I can solo it up here a little bit. So that's really all it's doing right now. The thing with reverb and delay when you have them in series like this is you get all this nice mojo coming out of the delay, and then you'll wash it all out with the reverb. So what I'm doing with the reverb here is I'm just bringing in enough so that it's not masking what's going on with the delay. And let me see if I can make an example of that. We're only listening to the wet side right now. Alright, so that's reverb all the way down. Let's dial some in. I've got my analog signal guitar mixed in as well. It's probably about as far as I dare go with it. Now I could obviously go way higher with it, which can be cool, but when you got a whole mix going, I don't know, I guess I can make an argument for use. I'd probably take down the length of the decay quite a bit if I wanted to try doing something this wet. But there's probably days I'd do something like this. But what I like to do is, you know, the tendency when you mix in a reverb or a delay or any effect for that matter is to do it on an island, do it by itself, which is fine. But once you get your mix going, like right now I've got everything going. I want to hear what works best in this context, so I'm just going to bring it in slowly until it sounds right in the mix. I just want to make it sound live. Remember, this is only affecting the guitar. The drums and the bass have their own reverb. Okay, we're going to call that good. Okay, so the part I skipped over is my gain stages. All right, so let's see here. How do I have this? So I'm going from the compression, which is the PC2A, down to the fuzz face, or in this case an Analog Man sun face, into the Fairfax. And yes, I know what the Fairfax's intent was, but in this setting I find it sounds best right here, into the Mustang Audio GT, or the Lauren Audio Mustang GT. So I'm gonna mute the mic and go through just some of the overdrive sounds I get out of it. Okay, so that's just the direct. There's three slightly different flavors of overdrive there, but these three stack together really nicely in this context. And what I do is what I call the women tone setting when I'm playing a Les Paul style guitar, which is rolling off all of the treble on the bridge pickup all the way, and then having both pickups turned on. So you end up with a very muffled clean tone, but once you start adding the gain in, That's just the Mustang. Fairfax stacked with it. And now we're adding the fuzz in. And that, again, so this is everything on 10. Volume, or tone down. Just smooths it out real nice. And another little trick I like to do with a Les Paul is, and a Gretsch for that matter, is just roll off the neck pickup a tiny bit, and it usually cleans it up. That's rolled off a little bit, all the way. A little thick, just a tiny bit rolled off. And depending on your mix, you might roll it off a little more. Mind you, the bridge pickups is all, the tone is all the way rolled off. So another thing I like to do is just the Fairfax and the Mustang. Both volumes all the way up. Gonna bring up the tone on the bridge a little. Almost all the way up. Now obviously I'm playing with my fingers. If you're playing with a pick, settings might be different, but that woman tone setting is a pretty safe one, especially with a fuzz. Rolling the tone off on a fuzz is something I would suggest to anybody who's trying to figure out what a fuzz is and how to use a fuzz. There's something very special that happens when you roll a tone off on your guitar and send that signal into a fuzz. So there you go. Basic walkthrough here. So once I turn the play off there, oh, I forgot to add in the mood, bummer. I don't think we missed it. But it adds that interesting X factor in, the original mood. The Mark II mood is very interesting, but it doesn't sound as good as the original, and it doesn't have that X factor as the original. It's kind of an idealized version of the mood. Not knocking it. I've got some pushback from friends about talking about that thing like I don't like it. It's not that I don't like it. I've owned 3 of them. I've owned 3 of the Mark II moods because I keep telling myself, I missed something. No, I didn't miss something. I just like the original one better. I can get reverbs and all that other crap out of other stuff. To get this weirdness that the original mood had, you can't get it anywhere else. I don't like the way I'm just going to get on a soapbox here for a second. When it comes to the Mood Mark II, I don't like the way it's EQ'd. Same thing with the Brothers AM. Whomever's ear is lending their ears to developing the EQ in those just doesn't have the same ear as me, and it's not to say it doesn't sound good. It doesn't work for me in my setting. Alternately, whomever at Strymon is taking the reins on stuff like this Fairfax and the Cloudburst, like Strymon stuff starting to come out with some mojo. That was my big criticism of Strymon up until some of these newer pedals started coming out, is they were too vanilla. They worked perfectly, they worked sublimely, but they had no character. And it has nothing to do with digital. I'm not being an analog snob now. There is an argument to be made about the dynamic range of an analog signal and what you can do with it in a digital realm of a much wider dynamic range. I think that's the challenge, is finding a way to use analog gear in a digital setting where you're not kind of ruining the mojo that you get out of that analog stuff. It's not just a simple matter of pumping it in. There's something that gets lost when you take a narrow dynamic range signal and put it into an environment that's a much wider dynamic range. It gets lost in there or something. I don't know. But in any case, that's my basic signal chain, and I think I'm going to rest on this for a while, because I can do 90% of this just with my Boss GT1000 core. But you lose a lot of the flexibility. You lose some of the mojo. Boss is similar to Strymon in that there's really no mojo there. I'll be the first guy, and I haven't said this much, and forgive me, because a lot of people really like the Waza stuff. I was disappointed by it. I have, can you see it in the background? That's like a 1984, 85 JC120. It's one of my favorite amps of all time, and the reverb in that thing is still magic. But for the chorus, for them to come out with that pedal and say it's the same, no, it's not. It's not at all, which is very disappointing to me, because I was so excited. Because obviously, in my setting here, the whole point of this whole setup, by the way, is I got to kind of be able to play in headphones. I can't make a lot of noise. It's really unrealistic to think you can make a JC120 an appropriate volume level in a home setting. So in any case, I'll get off my soapbox now. So there's a basic walkthrough. Feel free to post any questions if you want. The viewer that asked about a walkthrough is really looking to incorporate their Trio into their setup. So really, I like using the Trio before the amp, sending the amp side to the amp, so the loop will also feed the amp, and then sending the mixer side to my mixer, which is just the bass and drums. Or I take that back, I'm sending it through some processing, multi-effect processing, into my mixer. Through everything ends up through my bus compression here, and then into my final plugins I've got on my computer. So there you go. Thanks for asking the questions. I kind of treat this channel like a vlog, but all of a sudden I have almost 500 subscribers. There's actually a lot of stuff I could probably talk about. I just got to figure out how to do it without it taking 8 hours a day, you know what I'm saying? So having said that, in any case, thank you for watching. Until next time.